us brother pastors are reaching out to the men who wrote this letter and the rest of the leadership in the state. And we're coming to you humbly asking these questions, bringing our concerns.
It may look totally insane to the world. We may, to the world, look so foolish, but so be it. We're playing to Christ. We're playing to an audience of one. We need to hear from Him, well done. The world's never going to give us accolades.
It's not an issue of if Christ were to return and you weren't for abolishing abortion, would you lose your salvation? But it is an issue of you will give an account before Christ for every word you say, every action that you do. I cannot imagine standing before Jesus Christ and telling Him, I opposed the immediate abolition of abortion.
Thank you for joining us. We want to spend a few minutes here talking about SB13, and we're some pastors and elders in Southern Baptist churches. And before we get started, I want to go around and let's introduce ourselves, and then we'll get into the details here. So, Dusty, or
Josh, go ahead.
Josh King, pastor at Meridian Church.
I'm Dusty Devers. I'm one of the pastors at Grace Community Church of Elgin.
Jay Jones, one of the pastors at Christ Fellowship Church in Lawton.
I'm George Mays, and I'm one of the elders at Christ Fellowship in Lawton also.
I'm Corey Anderson. I'm also one of the pastors at Grace Community Church in Elgin.
And I'm Billy Elkins, pastor at Trinity Baptist Church in Chickasha. As we get started here, I just, several days ago, I got a text about SB13. I've been kind of following it, and I got this text that said the leaders of the Southern Baptist Convention are at the Capitol. They haven't made a decision. Please pray. And so we begin to pray and think about how this is going to go and how the Southern Baptists can get behind this bill, SB13, that abolishes abortion in Oklahoma. And I just knew that our leaders would come in support of SB13. I mean, I have been a pastor for 26 years and preached, I don't know, countless sermons on abortion, and preaching that it needs to be abolished and working toward that, and supporting the women's centers, the crisis pregnancy centers, and all of that. And I just assumed that we, as Baptists in Oklahoma, were all on the same page. And when I heard that our leaders came out, well, initially it was neutrality, and then we received a letter that explained why they can't support it, so that to me was not neutrality. That crushed me. That was that moment in which I realized that maybe we're not all on the same team here, you know? And so that was really disappointing. The second thing that caused me to get involved, like I have in the last several days, I began to read, and I don't get on Facebook often, but I began to read some of the comments, and I began to read some of the comments from Southern Baptist church members. And I started seeing comments like, where are the pastors on this? Where are our leaders? Where are our shepherds on this? And that really got to me. And so at that moment, I knew that at least as a pastor, I've been a pastor 26 years, been a member of a Southern Baptist church. I was in a nursery 1 week after I was born, almost 53 years ago, in a Southern Baptist church. So grew up in it. And so I just, at that point, I knew that I had to say something. So we did. And I found out that you, my brothers, and many others are feeling the same way that I was feeling. I feel a little bit betrayed, Felt like I wasn't consulted or nobody asked us. Every meeting for years, you would go to the BGCO meeting and they would remind us that this is a bottom-up organization, that they are there to serve at the pleasure of the churches. And when this statement came out and when our leaders made this statement, it felt like very much like a top-down denomination. I just hindsight looking at all of this, my preference, maybe they would do this differently as well, I'm sure, after all the firestorm, but my preference for them would have been to say that each pastor, each church, according to their conscience, contacts their representative and leave it at that, rather than trying to go and take charge and say, the Southern Baptists of Oklahoma have spoken, and now some of the lawmakers up there think that now the Southern Baptists are against this bill, and that is absolutely not true. And I think that's what we're here for, is kind of set the record straight and want people to know why we're in support of SB13 and why we're kind of going against our leaders on this.
And I think the majority of people that are away from the convention in Oklahoma City or even some of the bigger churches in Oklahoma City, the churches, the smaller churches which make up the BGCO, the people of those churches, when explained this bill, seem to be in overwhelmingly backing it. They're for it. So for me, when I read that, it seemed to me that you had three men, whether they had the counsel of other people, we don't know, but all we know is these three men. They wield a tremendous amount of power and influence. And what they say, unfortunately, the reality of the world is that many pastors will now fall in line. I don't care what their motives are, not here to question their motives. That's the reality of the way the Southern Baptist Church works, is people will fall in line with what the leadership says, which undermines the ability to even have a conversation about this. Like you're saying, it would have been better for them to say, I wish they would have just said, let each pastor in their congregation discuss this. We are for life, which is what they reiterated, and I believe that they are. We are for life. We want each church to decide on SB 13, and then left it alone. If they truly wanted to be neutral, this seems in a way that three men have single-handedly potentially killed this. Which also simultaneously, if you think about just our rights as Oklahomans, what should happen is this should be taken out of committee and discussed. So you have 4 co-signers. I don't know how many that is, around 400,000 people, I guess. I could be wrong. You guys can correct me. But you have these representatives now. Their people who they represent aren't going to be heard at all. This bill is being held up in committee. It can't be discussed. If there's a problem with the language, which we're going to discuss, I think, these 3 coming up, the 3 reasons that the BGCO won't support it, if these really are problems, let it go out of committee and let them discuss it fully on the floor. Let people make language amendments. Let them discuss it. Let them debate it. Let the process play out rather than killing it in committee, which, again, just I think undermines Oklahomans.
I know whenever I read the letter, I texted a couple of you guys, called a couple, and we were all quite frankly shocked and upset, but all of us are trying to assume the best of our brothers, assuming and believing that they long to see abortion abolished, and long to glorify God in the positions that they have. And so we're trying to take that posture without assuming the worst of them, or assuming something else is going on, assuming ulterior motives. So if some of that comes out, it's because we are deeply moved and emotional about this particular topic. We've preached on it consistently. We've rallied our churches behind fighting against this abomination, and are really saddened that some of these positions would be taken by our leaders. So we're trying. If you're a leader who is in agreement with the is in agreement with the BGCO's position in their letter, please hear us. And if you're one of those leaders, please hear us coming from a place of, yes, we'll admit we're hurt and we're confused and we're saddened, but we are trying to the best of our ability to believe all things about you. And so we're coming to you with questions. We're coming to you with questions and our concerns.
Right.
And since we find ourselves all in this place, post facto, letter has been written. The issues have been put forward in a way that we don't think is best. Right. We are standing here saying we've got to speak. We've got to do some things for the sake of the unborn, for the glory of God, and for those that we represent as well. So that's where this conversation is coming from. So if you are one of those leaders, please hear us. We long for unity among Southern Baptists in Oklahoma, and across the world for that matter. But Southern Baptists represent a massive number of Christians in Oklahoma. So we long for unity, but we can't have unity at the cost of truth and at the cost of lives and at the cost of the glory of God and the gospel being clear.
Yeah.
And the division of what is worldly and what is God-honoring. So we want to be generous, is that right? And charitable?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think some people, I mean, we have to give grace. Not all that long ago, I think many of us would say that we would hold to a pro-life ideology and did not see the inconsistency with supporting laws that were pro-life. And if I could just think back to, not that long ago, I wouldn't want people throwing stones at me over that and beating me over the head with that. But for somebody to come along and try to just explain the difference of why we ought to be for abolishing abortion and not for trying to incrementally place all of these laws which tell people who can kill children, when they can kill children, how they can do it, and what type of facility they can do it in. I think our desire would be that we could present this in a way that wouldn't be a turnoff to people, so that more people could get on board with calling for the immediate end of abortion. If you don't like using the word abolishing abortion because you're worried about who that's associated with, then use the word end abortion, now, abolish abortion, whatever. Yeah. Use whatever hashtag you want to use. But you're right, Dusty, I think we want to be gracious, but it can be difficult at times because we're very passionate about this. And in a way, we feel as if our people's voices have been robbed by someone who has such a big voice. They have such influence, and they have such a big voice and so much power that our churches can feel that our voice has been taken away from us. But we want to engage with what they've written and presented. So I think that's what we want to do, is not read behind it, just take what they have written in the letter, go through it, try to understand it, and then ask questions, make rebuttals.
Okay, well, let's look at the three statements that they've given in their letter. They wrote a letter, they released it on the 21st of February to Baptists in Oklahoma, and there was there's been, so much division over the internet, so let's look at this. The first one is that they say that we have several concerns about SB13 through direct conversation with the bill's principal author, that's Joseph Silk. And their first concern is this: credible expert legal policy analysis indicates SB13 will be invalidated immediately by the courts if it passes at all, and we cannot save lives with legislation that never goes into effect. What do you guys think?
Of course. I mean, I don't think anybody is saying this isn't going to be challenged. That's the purpose of it, I think. I think it's worded in such a way that it is going to be challenged. So what?
It is. It's a direct challenge to
Right.
to Roe.
So what? First, when do we decide what's righteous based upon what is successful? Second, there's language in there that deals with it. There is language in the bill that addresses this this challenge to the courts. And then third, we have, as Oklahoma Southern Baptists, been fighting for the end of abortion for decades. Where did we think it was going to go? Like, what was the end of this? It was always going to be to overturn Roe versus Wade, and that is only going to happen if there is a case that challenges it. The Supreme Court isn't going to simply, behind closed doors, say, you know what, I think we should revisit Roe versus Wade. That's not how it works. They have to have a case brought so that they can decide on it.
One of the things that we addressed in the letter that we wrote, if you don't know, we've got a letter that was sent out today, and we will post it in the notes to this video. But one of the things that we addressed there about this potentially getting overturned in Roe is, or in the Supreme Court, is this issue that even if Roe versus Wade was overturned, even if it was overturned as a federal statute, then the laws in each of the states that allow for abortion to still be in place would be the very laws that kept abortion legal.
Right.
So you have to enact a law like this that abolishes abortion at the state level to then challenge the federal level, which was, Congress never made a law.
Right.
This was the federal, the SCOTUS overruling, overstepping their authority.
Yeah.
And anyway, if that's just the thing, we have to have this in place. Otherwise, all we're left with is abortion if
Right.
it's overturned.
And the other point here too is that it appears that Oklahoma Baptists or Oklahoma lawmakers are expecting some other state to do this, right? I mean, we're just going to wait to see if somebody else challenges it, and then we'll ride in on their coattails with this. When my question is, why not Oklahoma? Why not Oklahoma run this all the way up to the Supreme Court, and let's see where this goes?
I mean, this really is about state sovereignty.
Yes, it is.
I mean, that really is the main issue. Does Oklahoma have the right to make its own laws? And something that struck me today, I don't know if you guys have thought about this, we're seeing these pro-abortion states make more and more radical laws.
Yes.
If Roe versus Wade is overturned, do we seriously expect that these states aren't going to try to assert their sovereignty in keeping abortion
That's
legal?
exactly right.
They're
They've
going
used the
to-
federal government
Right.
to as a means to make sure abortion is legal in all of the United States. Now that we've got two new Supreme Court justices on there, these liberal, Virginia and New York, now these liberals are running back to their states trying to pass these radical laws to the point of infanticide.
Right.
Using the states to shore up their abortion laws because they see the handwriting on the wall. I mean, they see the writings on the wall with SCOTUS. So it needs to be challenged. And why not Oklahoma?
Yes.
Of all the reasons given, this one grieves me the most because it approaches justice in pragmatic terms. And I'd wish for the kind of attitude that we see Jonathan conveying to his armor bearer. Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that Yahweh will work for us, for nothing can hinder Yahweh from saving by many or by few. This is not that doesn't convey faith in our God to me. And then I think of Wilberforce laboring for 4 decades, and his legislation defeated 11 times
Yes.
before he saw the abolition of the slave trade. And he was an incrementalist, but he was an incrementalist towards winning. He had an end game. He knew that Normandy had to be taken before Berlin. But he knew this, that once you get to Berlin, you don't win it by retreating.
Right.
Like
You take
we
it.
have incrementally gotten all the way up to the walls. It's time, fire, shoot.
Right. Yep.
And if we don't win, we don't win.
Yeah.
But it's time to go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just assumes that SCOTUS is speaking from a place where they're never wrong. You know, they've been wrong throughout our history consistently. If you think of the Black Codes, if you think of the various laws like the Indian Removal Act or
Dred Scott.
Dred Scott or Brown versus the Board of Education, Topeka, for some of these, or the sending the Japanese into internment. Some of these, they've come back many years later and apologized for what they've done. Why are we punting so much to SCOTUS?
Well, one of the problems is it has to do with, again, not trying to launch volleys, but when you speak as the head of a denomination, you ought to speak with in the sense that you are a pastor. Even maybe if you don't have a church, you probably have done that your whole life. You're speaking to a denomination, a conservative denomination. You ought to be examining this issue from a biblical perspective. Pastors speak truth to those in power. Right? We don't kowtow to power when power is immoral, or we find ourselves in a place where we are in dereliction of our duty and responsibilities. So even if every law in the land, and we knew, like, it's never going to happen, our position still should be, we will never compromise with evil and wickedness.
That's right.
And that's how pastors need to be speaking. So pastors shouldn't go seeking lawmakers and say, hey, lawmaker, what do you think is going to pass? The pastor should go to the lawmaker and say, this is evil and wicked. And you need to examine your heart to see why you're not on board with this and why you won't fight tooth and nail in the legal system to overturn it. That is what we need in our churches.
We need the prophetic voice, right? This letter doesn't sound prophetic. Right? It sounds more like, well, we'll just pass it down the line and maybe something better will come along. That's not what we need.
That's right. Especially in a time when the Southern Baptists could speak so prophetically, so profoundly the Word of God into a culture that's lost its mind. We look like we're losing our mind with them when we speak with letters like this. They're so easily corrected. This just doesn't make sense. So the second note that they've provided is SB13, as proposed, unnecessarily and purposely repeals hard-earned pro-life laws that have helped significantly reduce Oklahoma's abortion rate, including repealing our state's ban on partial birth abortion, parental notification requirements, the unborn child protection from dismemberment abortion, among numerous other life-saving laws. So this is why they say they can't support this bill.
Okay, Josh, if the first one bothers you the most, this one bothers me the most because it's so obvious that is exactly what it's supposed to do. This is where I try not to read into the motives of this open letter, because either they are simply misunderstanding or they are intentionally trying to word this in a way that makes it sound worse than it is. Right. Yes, it does repeal all of these other laws. It does get rid of these other laws because you don't need them anymore. If abortion across the board is criminalized, then you don't need all of these other laws saying, well, this kind is criminalized, this kind is criminalized, Look at the murder. Look at the laws concerning murder in the Oklahoma Constitution. Is there a law concerning guns, knives, rope, poison? I mean, do they just
Right.
go through all the different types of ways you can murder someone, or is there just one law that says
Right.
murder is homicide, and here's what that means? It's the same with abortion. You don't need all of these. You don't need all of these laws if you have the one that supersedes and covers all of them. SB13 covers all of these other laws. It doesn't just throw them out the window. It covers them. It's better.
Yeah, I did not like the way that was worded in this document, because for someone who's a low information person on this issue, what they're going to do is they're going to gasp and be like, SB13 is going to take away all of our pro-life laws, and now you've poisoned the well now. And
They're making this this anti-abortion bill sound like a pro-abortion bill.
Yeah,
That's what they're
so
doing.
I think this is one of the issues that's right on the surface, is the emotional appeal for people. But what's going to happen if it gets passed and then it gets struck down by the courts? Then we're going to be left with nothing, and it's going to be the Wild West of abortion, and people are just going to be throwing their babies on the streets. Corey asked that question on our Facebook group, Oklahoma Baptists for hashtag SB13, and one of the attorneys responded to it who has looked at the bill and who studied it considerably. So do you want to talk to that?
I would really encourage folks to go to the page, and it's a very long explanation, very thorough. But something that I'm thinking here too is that, and I could be mistaken about this, I'm certainly not a legal expert, but if the law is struck down, then everything that it repealed would be annulled, or its repealing of things would be annulled as well.
Right.
It says on the last page of the bill that it's inseverable, so it's all or nothing. So if it gets struck down, then we've lost nothing. You know, those laws are still in effect. We still have all those restrictions, and we've lost no ground in that regard. So why not try? You know, why not go for it?
It's as if we spent a long time putting up all this scaffolding. There was so much hard work put into putting up the scaffolding. Let's not build the skyscraper, because then all that scaffolding would eventually have to come down. What would be the point of the scaffolding anymore?
Yeah.
And we're saying, if the point of all this incrementalism was not to win the game, what was it?
Right.
What's all this scaffolding for?
Yeah, it's kind of like the new covenant. If all the shadows and types have been replaced or superseded by the perfect, then the perfect is here.
Right.
We don't need the old. I mean, in this sense, where we're applying it to this law, we don't need the old imperfect laws about abortion when the perfect is here. It's murder. It's over.
Right. Yeah. And there's just another. I just want to speak maybe to a pastoral issue that's, I think some people don't realize maybe about pro-life laws. So if you're a pastor and you're watching this, or you're a church member, we ought to consider as Christians what type of laws that we can write and what type of laws that we can support. Yes, pro-life laws may overwhelmingly get the support of Christians, but my question is what does God think of them? And I think we find the answer very clearly told to us in Isaiah chapter 10. He gives a warning to the wicked nation, and particularly to the wicked leaders of the people. And he says, "Woe to those who decree iniquitous decrees, and the writers who keep writing oppression, to turn aside the need from justice and to rob the poor of the people of their right." God hates these iniquitous decrees. So what you do when you write a pro-life law, I think writing a pro-life law for a Christian should be out of the picture. Because what you're doing is you're justifying with saying, hey, but we're going to save a lot of people if I write this law. But what the law really is doing is you're saying, I'm a Christian, I'm writing a law, and I'm authoring it, and I'm telling you exactly when you can kill a child, and I'm telling you who can kill a child. I'm telling you where this killing might take place, and I'm telling you how that killing can occur. Without realizing it, perhaps, you've just written a law that tells people when they can kill people.
Right.
Either life begins at conception or it doesn't, and for the Christian, there's no question that the position that we take is that it does. Christians ought not to be writing these type of laws, and they should not be supporting these type of laws. God hates hands that shed innocent blood. What do you think he feels about his people being on board with laws that tell you when you can kill people? The only consistent position to hold as a Christian is the immediate end of abortion. Call it abolition, call it ending abortion. I don't care what it is that you call it. You cannot support these type of laws. The middle question says, well, what about all these laws that are going to be repealed? Praise God, they're going to be repealed because they're wicked.
Yeah. So the last question, or the last statement there says this: the bill goes even so far to repeal original Oklahoma laws already on the books that allow abortion only to save a mother's life. I think we've all read several articles, even white paper articles, that show that it's never in this technological age necessary to take a mother's or take a child or take a mother's life in this situation. So really, what's at the heart of this? Is it the preferences for the mother, or the ability for a doctor, based on his professional training and scientific the capabilities of technology, to make a decision in that moment via triage or something else?
Right. Like, explain it a little bit more. Let's just try to break it down for the person who's new to this. What do you mean by that? In the moment of crisis, right? Woman's life's on the line.
In a moment
What
of crisis,
happens?
a doctor has been trained, just like an emergency room doctor, or a doctor that's at a bombing or something. They've been trained to make decisions on how to keep everyone in best health possible. It's the Hippocratic Oath: do no harm. They are to try to support life at all, with every ability that they have.
Right.
And all that team of doctors and nurses, the medical staff, and the technology they have before them to support life.
Yeah.
And in the event that they can't, then they make the decision right then and there on who and what to save. But you don't give them a way to say, I'm not trying to support life, I'm actually trying to bring death.
Right. There's no scenario where you have to kill a baby to save a mother anymore. But there could be a scenario, perhaps, and there's language in there to protect doctors if they have to make that difficult call. They only have limited resources. We're mobilizing those resources of these people to save life. And if the child dies while they're trying to save both lives, that bill has protections for doctors in it.
That's right.
And what they wrote here, it is extremely misleading.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This, I think, divides us. I mean, we can't unify around this. There is no scenario in which we would say all abortion is banned except for this one.
That's right.
And so this group of BGCO leaders that say that we are categorically opposed to abortion have to put in that little asterisk.
But
There is a category.
Except.
Yeah.
And we don't have that category. We don't have that asterisk.
No.
We are opposed to abortion, period. And again, from a pastoral perspective, I've been thinking about this over and over and over again. What are we communicating with that kind of language? Abortion to save the mother's life. What we're saying is it's okay to kill another person if it's threatening your life. And is that the gospel? I mean, is that the message that we're supposed to be communicating as pastors? That this person's life isn't as important as mine? That's not what the scriptures are teaching us at all, that we're supposed to lay down our lives for other people, not the other way around.
Especially an innocent
Right.
person.
Yeah.
If an innocent person they can't be threatening your life.
Right.
What's their weapon?
Yeah.
This baby is not weaponized. There's nothing they're bringing to threat. The doctor needs to have the opportunity to make a decision to support life in every way possible and not a way out for murder.
Well, that's where our culture's been desensitized, because immediately our knee-jerk reaction as a culture, of course you take the life of the baby. I think at times prior to all this, the culture and the communities would do everything they could to save the life of that baby and the life of the mother. And they would do that. And so I think that that this is in that letter we call it a special pleading, and it really does play into the arguments of the pro-abortion group. They take this scenario that hardly ever happens, likely won't happen, and use it as the reason to keep it all abortions legal. Where we need to put this back to the doctors and let the experts try to save both lives the best they can. And if it's not possible one way or the other, no one's going to prosecute them if they are doing the best they can to save the lives of both.
Yeah, very good.
Well, at the end of the letter, they talk about, from their perspective, after they sat with Joseph Silk, and they believe that there are more proven and plausible life-saving policies Oklahoma could enact en route to ending abortion.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think I already spoke to that. Any law that tells you when you can kill a child and how you can is not appropriate for a pastor to get behind.
No.
If we just do a mental exercise, if the Lord Jesus Christ came back on the day they wrote that, right there, would he be for it? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And so we need to live the truths that we profess consistently. The world sees a lot of inconsistency in the things that we say and the way that we live. We have to live every day as if this is our last day to live, which means we stand up for what is right and what is just, even if it's not popular with the culture.
At this point, Baptists, obviously we're not gamblers, but I think the analogy here that I see for Baptists in Oklahoma right now, right here, if not now, when, right? Mm-hmm. And the analogy would be like playing poker. This would be the time in which we take all of our chips, all of our political clout, everything that we have in this state, and shove them all out. Not trying to hold some political clout back or something that we can use later. This is time to put it all out there and say, this is it. This is a hill to die on. Yeah. We've had enough of Neville Chamberlains. It really is time for a William Wilberforce, or the Winston Churchill, if you want to keep that. But the William Wilberforce probably really fits this analogy. Someone who's just going to stand firm here. The end game has always been to make abortion illegal. And here it is, right here in our grasp. And we're going to say there's better ways to do this?
Right.
What keeps coming back to me again and again is that Southern Baptists have been on the wrong side of abolition before. Are we really going to be on the wrong side again?
Right.
Are we really going to argue the same way that the Southern slaveholders were arguing?
Yeah, we apologize for the first one.
It's been an embarrassment.
Yeah.
It's been an embarrassment ever since.
Yeah.
It still is an embarrassment.
Yeah.
Right? Southern Seminary just put out an apology. just a few months ago. It's still a blight on our name. This is the same. This is going to be the same thing if we don't repent and turn around.
Yeah. Well, let's stand up and be counted here. You know, whatever happens, at least we'll stand before the Lord and say, Lord, we did everything we could to stop this American Holocaust.
Right.
We did everything we could.
So, us brother pastors are reaching out to the men who wrote this letter and the rest of the leadership in the state. And we're coming to you humbly asking these questions, bringing our concerns. Hopefully, you can see that they have been addressed from a place of honesty. And we fear the Lord. We fear that we will, by our association, be guilty of furthering the cause of abortion in our state.
There's something that I think that we often forget, is that we're to be a holy people because our God is holy. Yes, Baptists, we champion once saved, always saved, but we are really bad in our denomination about promoting holiness and sanctification and a progressive changing of our person into the image of Christ over our life. It's not an issue of if Christ were to return and you weren't for abolishing abortion, would you lose your salvation? But it is an issue of you will give an account before Christ for every word you say, every action that you do. I cannot imagine standing before Jesus Christ and telling him, I opposed the immediate abolition of abortion. I would be ashamed. And we ought to live like that is a very possible reality today. Our life is a vapor. You don't know if tomorrow you will be standing before Christ. So our plea is, I think what we want to make sure people know, we are all for abolition. Don't try to check us out and say, oh, those guys are with AHA or something like that, right? None of us are AHA, though we hold to all the tenets of abolition. We may not fly their symbol. You know, we are for the local church. Something that you may be fearing is buying into this abolitionist ideology. Is that you think it could harm your church? I'm not sure, but all of us are local church pastors. We love the local church. We love our church members, and they may not even, all of our members may not be all the way there with us. Some of them may. But don't use the language of abolition and those who you think have been associated with this as an excuse to not get behind SB 13. Get behind it because it's right and it's biblical. It's what is just. It's what is righteous. It's what's Christ honoring. It's a time for us to forget ourselves, I think, in this moment, and do what we know would be pleasing to the Lord.
And it may look totally insane to the world. We may, to the world, look so foolish, but so be it. We're playing to Christ. We're playing to an audience of one. We need to hear from him, well done. The world's never going to give us accolades. But as long as we have breath, and as long as we're shepherds, we need to shepherd the flock to do what is right in the eyes of the Lord. And we will do it as those who will give an account.
Yeah, we have created a Facebook page. Again, it's called Oklahoma Baptists for #SB13. And we have written a letter there raising some concerns with this letter that the leadership of the BGCO has written. If you are in agreement with us and want to raise these concerns back to these brothers at the BGCO. You can read that letter and sign it. We'll put it in the link to this video. We'd encourage you to consider these things, consider them with the Bible in hand, consider them on the basis of life and a consistent life, letting God define those things and not politics and whatever political clout we have. I think Billy's right. We should put it all on the table. Better to live for Christ and have no political clout, or to spend it in this situation for life, than to have no political clout at all. So you can look there, and yes, there's a rally on Monday, and it's from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock at the Capitol building there in Oklahoma, and some of us will be speaking there, and it's a rally in support of SB13, and it's Baptists in support of SB13.